Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I would like to really commend my colleagues who have really articulated this issue as openly and as sincerely as we've been talking about it. I want to thank Honorable Buru Odinga for acknowledging that my colleague, my young Senator Eddie Okech, one of the very able individuals in this House, who has contributed quite a bit, and I sit with him in the Finance Committee, and I'm proud of him, and I'm happy the issues he has raised are quite substantive, and many people may not see them. My leader, my friend, my brother, Honorable Okiya Omtata, Kenya will vindicate you. You have consistently raised these issues even before I came to the Senate. Some of us did not understand the weightiness and the importance of raising this issue. Senator Omtata, thank you for noticing that we need to separate the central bank and the treasury from the executive. That is in fact one of the challenges that we are going to face as a committee, and we are going to interrogate this. I also want to give credit to my brother, Honorable Mungatana. Thank you, sir. Your experience and time enables you to analyze these issues passionately. I believe that what you have discussed will make Kenya a better place. Mr. Speaker, the public debt management issue in our country is at a crisis level. The reason why I say this is because, Mr. Speaker, we have been looking, analyzing, discussing what is the cost of our debt? Why do we borrow so much money? Why is it that we, in the last 10 years, close to 12 years, we've actually increased our debt by 100%? When President Kibaki was President of the Republic of Kenya, our debt was, by the time he was living, 1.1 trillion shillings. After that period, and you look at where we are right now, our debt is close to 12 trillion. And the question that you ask when you sit in this House, what is it that we need to do to make sure that this exercise, which I personally call an exercise in futility, where we are borrowing excessively, where in fact we are borrowing domestically, Mr. Speaker, where the interest rates at which we are borrowing government money, state funds, you are now at about, some of the banks are giving us money at 12%, 16%. I am told one of the loans was borrowed at 18%. And yet, Mr. Speaker, you know that we can borrow money globally at the cost of 2%. We can actually reschedule Kenya's debts, all of them. All of them, all our debts can be rescheduled. We can go to the international money market. We can borrow at interest rates between 2 and 4%. And we can pay out all our debt, stock of debt, and make sure we begin afresh. These are the issues that I would want the committee to look at, and I would want this House to look at. Number two, Mr. Speaker, there was a basic operating standard procedure on how we used our borrowed money. What did we do, Mr. Speaker? The money would come, normally the rates at which we borrowed was at 30-70, like Senator Eddie said. Domestically, we would borrow at 30%, because when you borrow domestically, then for the ordinary business person or the ordinary Kenyan, borrowing in commercial banks becomes more expensive, and the banks do not want to lend to ordinary business people. Why? Because of the cost of risk. The risk of where a commercial enterprise might borrow money and not deliver. So what happens is that commercial banks prefer when bills, bonds, and stocks is what they trade in, and the government is very comfortable with that. Why? I'm sure my brother Eddie and many other leaders here have talked about it. When you go and negotiate with a commercial bank and you are borrowing 1 trillion shillings, and this commercial bank is actually giving you this money at a certain percentage, information and data gets to us where people in government will go and negotiate with some of these commercial banks, and they will even enable these commercial banks, after they have borrowed money for the government, to allow the commercial bank to do overnight lending. where interest rates are delivered, are earned, and we never discussed these issues openly until recently when Okiya Omtatah started discussing it. Why do we borrow? Mr. Speaker, we borrow because sometimes our budget has got gaps. Previously, the Kenyan government position, if you look at when Saitoti was the Minister for Finance, come up to President Kibaki and move on, you will realize that we were borrowing when we would need a stopgap measure where we would borrow most probably 5% or whatever that the balance was, and then our budget would be balanced and we would keep on moving as the economy was growing. What happened? Now we borrow for big projects. We borrow for those projects where billions and billions, not Kenyan shillings, billions and billions, Mr. Speaker, of American dollar funding is what we are dealing with. As a result, the money that was supposed to deal with the basic issues of our governance, basic issues of our very existence. How do we handle the health sector? How we are handling our education? How are we handling our agriculture? The very basic sectors of our economy that are meant to deliver for the Kenyan public. We then decide, no, we are going to take this money and do these big-time projects. Why? Because the big-time projects is where we get our kickbacks. That is where we generate our revenue by arguing and saying, no. You don't have to spend any money in farming. Look for something big that you can do, so that then that is where the money is shared, and that is where we really don't even have to work very hard about this. Why? Because even if we borrow, we'll be able to pay this money anyway. The problem we have, soon, we are not going to be able to pay this money because we are at 68%. If by next year we are going to borrow another 1.2 trillion like we did last year, the reality is soon we are going to be at 90%, and then after that Kenya will just become like Thailand. We will not pay our debts back. We will not be able to pay salaries. The economy will just become it will become a supermarket. Essentially, what does a supermarket do? We become consumers. Then you don't have to worry about agricultural development and growth. You don't have to worry about your health sector. In fact, we as a people will then now begin thinking about, are we taking our patients to Rwanda, which is a country that is operating their health facilities better than ours? Or are we going to educate our children in Rwanda, where the kids are going to school, achieving the grades they want? The educational sector is actually teaching mathematics. And what do we do in our country? We are now saying we don't even have to allow kids to learn maths. Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a passionate plea to my colleagues in this House. The responsibility of fixing the mess we are in falls particularly on this House. Our country has a problem. We are not able to transform this country from a low-level, low-income developing country into a mid-level, upper-level developing country. We are slowly going to go back to where we used to be, an underdeveloped country. A country that depends on its revenues so that it can govern itself on a daily basis. We are not going to be a country that invests on those sectors that are going to change the livelihoods of our people. We are not a country that is willing to tackle the issues that are important. We must make the central bank to be independent. We must make the treasury to become advisory, so that the treasury's responsibility is to advise the president on what the economic issues are on a micro basis and on a macro basis. What do we do with interest rates? What are we doing with investments and savings? Why is investment in Kenya becoming a problem? Why are countries moving out? Because once companies move out of your country and they go and invest somewhere, then you have lesser of your people getting jobs, then you have lesser of your people generating revenue for themselves, and you have lesser of the government taking taxes, and you cannot continue taxing people indefinitely. Mr. Speaker, many of my colleagues have brought wonderful issues in this place, in this House. I am so happy with what is being discussed. We must make sure that we are able to make sure that the public debt management system is linked to the IFMI system. It is also linked to the own source revenue systems. How can you have a financial platform in your country that only deliberately has been cut into sections and bits and pieces because it makes it easier for those who are cutting deals and making money out of these state resources to do it without it looking seamless? And yet in reality, we are not seamlessly managing our debt and revenues, and yet we are seamlessly managing the stealing of those revenues and the resources. Mr. Speaker, I would like to insist that yes, the automation must be done on even how the withdrawals of payments for the repayment of the debts that we have. And yes, like Senator Eddie Okech has said, why don't we know what the debt stock in our republic is? You have the Auditor General giving you a different figure. You have the Controller of Budget giving you a different figure. You have the Budget Committee, the Finance Committee, when we were sitting the other day, the figure we are having of 12 trillion. I believe that our debt right now is at about 14 trillion. Can we get this committee, the Finance Committee and this House, to make sure that all those four institutions are called and we are able to, even if it means, Madam Speaker, we are able to get a forensic audit to be done so that historically we can even know how much money we borrowed, where did the money go, who spent that money, all the Eurobonds we have gotten, how much money has been used to pay debt as we speak. And you know what is very interesting, Madam Speaker? Even when we are paying the debts, our debt never goes down. How can you pay 800 billion of debt every year and yet the debt which you have of 12 trillion never goes down? It means the debts are actually not being paid. It means money is being siphoned off from the international money market, and we are told that this was collected so that we can go and pay our debts, and yet in reality, Madam Speaker, what actually happens is that this money cannot be accounted for by any of our institutions that we have set up to guard what is happening in our country in terms of financial management. So, Madam Speaker, I would like to really plead with the committee and members of this House, and I can see we are now slowly beginning to have a critical mass. Let us make sure that we know how much we are borrowing. Let us make sure we know where the money goes. Let us make sure what we can do. Let us, in the process of achieving this, let us make sure that whatever money that we borrow is utilized fairly, equitably amongst all our counties. And let us make sure, Madam Speaker, that Kenyans begin to trust government. If we don't have an open government, even if the head of state sings from morning till evening, begging Kenyans to raise taxes for him, they will refuse. Why? Because they feel that we are not being open enough and we are not telling them the truth as to what is happening to their money and what is happening to the money that is borrowed for development for our country. Madam Speaker, I would like to say another issue. I have watched what is happening in our country, and I've seen this for quite a long time, and the reason is I've been around for a while. Unless we change the way we behave, unless we change the strategies that we use, unless we change the socio-political, economic behavior as leadership, we are taking our country in the wrong direction. Why do I say so? We have a country. You expect what runs the economy of this country is the private sector. The private sector, the small businesses, the big businesses, the mix between MDGs, all these groups, when you put them together, that is the engine that is supposed to drive our economy. But you see, Madam Speaker, right now in Kenya, our economy is being driven by the national government. That is why everybody wants business in government. That is why everybody wants to do deals in government. That is why any transaction you see, everybody would want to own a piece of land owned by government. Everybody would want to have. Every single transaction we are conducting today is actually about government. How I plead with my colleagues here that we change that to the point where we agree that the private sector is going to be the driver, is going to be the engine that is going to change the country, the direction is going. That we have an economy that grows, the cake becomes bigger, we are responsible how we use our donor funds, we are responsible how we use all the money that we borrow, and we are responsible how we use the taxes that we collect from Kenyans. And Madam Speaker, my honest observation and honest feeling is that we are failing on all those gaps. And therefore, I would like to say that what works, let us follow it up. Let us make sure that our GDP ratio to debt and to borrowing should come down to 50-50. And let us make sure that when we borrow funds, we borrow externally, because money is cheaper at the international money market. We can go 70-30 as we have always been. And I had Honorable Buru Odinga mention, and it's true because of the institutional memory. He was in the treasury. There was a time when the Kenyan government borrowed any money, Madam Speaker. 30% of that money was grants. 70% is what we paid. And the loans were concessional, the loans were long-term, the loans were very soft. That is how you change and develop the development areas in our sectors. Madam Speaker, I would like to finally say that there has been this argument historically, which started about 10 years ago, that all the money we get, whether we borrow it or domestically, what we want to do is make sure that we actually use this money to do mega projects, where you want to spend 500 billion, where you want to spend 150 billion. Madam Speaker, Kenya just needs for us to fix the health sector, fix the education sector, make sure that we fix the basic roads. Basic roads. Make sure that there is an ease to do business. Make sure that the Kenyan public appreciates that our education is running well, that we are funding university students well, that the primary school must. Why can't we give free education, Madam Speaker, to our poor people in this country? Why? Because Kibaki did it. He was using 72 billion to take primary, secondary, and university students for free education. Right now, the Ministry of Education is given 640 billion shillings. And we can't give our children free education? And we borrow this money? We are spending 640 billion shillings for the education sector. And we are not able to give free education to our students. And you hear all these things about who prints books, where the money is going. I mean, Madam Speaker, for us to fix our country, yes, this House can come up with the recommendation, but unless we have structures and institutions that are going to be the defense mechanism we use about our bad behavior, we will not go anywhere. Why? Because, Honorable Mtata, you notice every single time in our republic, at least, I'm so happy it's been like nearly a week that you have not seen a scandal. There is scandal after scandal after scandal about public money. Can we stop the abuse, the misuse, the wastage of public funds so that we serve the Kenyan public with the dignity they deserve, so that we can leave a country that is better than we found it? And my worry is many of us may not see the contradiction of where we are. We are a country that has got a budget that can run between 6 to 7 countries within the East and Central African region. What we have as a budget can run those 7 countries. But if you take the population we have of 50 million, all these countries I'm mentioning, there are 6 or 7, their population is 300 million. How come we are not able to use the resources that we have to fix the mess we are in? And that is why I keep saying, we don't need to borrow. The money we have, in fact, is enough. All right? Why is the money not enough? We keep on having ghost workers. We employ teachers. We don't know who owns the...
Time up, Senator. Thank you. Okay, half a minute, you finish the sentence.
Yes. I just wanted to say, let us make sure there is open government, transparent government, where we are accountable to each other, where we manage the resources of our country with prudence and respect, and Kenyans will be always happy that we were in this house. And I really hope that this house, and particularly this house and the budget committee, will stand up and stand for the Kenyans. Madam Speaker, thank you. With all those many remarks, I second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Okoitandru Mutata, Busia County.
Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this very important debate. I will begin by referring to the Constitution, which is my Bible or my Quran on matters governance. Article 220 of the Constitution provides for how our budgets have to be made, their content, timing, and form. And within that particular section, it's clearly stated that our debts must be contained in the budgets, in the annual budgets that are made. The proposals to borrow and where money is to be borrowed from should be in the budget that comes to the Parliament every year. Now, contrary to that, Parliament has done something very strange and totally unconstitutional in this country by enacting something called the debt ceiling in the Public Finance Management Act. The debt ceiling, the concept of a debt ceiling has got a history. Before 1917, in the USA, Congress used to approve every debt that was borrowed by the Treasury for the executive in America, in the USA. In 2017, when the USA joined the First World War, Congress began the idea of allowing the Treasury